Welcome back, everybody, to Neutrality Studies. Today, again, with an update with Larry Johnson. Larry, welcome back.
Hey, Pascal, thank you for having me.
Very glad of having you back again. And just before we start, one more time, everybody, Larry has a wonderful channel of his own now, together with Pepe Escobar, on which they do a lot of analysis. If you're a fan of Larry, please also check out Transition Protocol. And Transition Protocol exists in 8 other languages, including Spanish, including German and French and Chinese. So if you watch this broadcast in another language, please also check out the language channels of Larry and Pepe. And with this out of the way, Larry, the Iran war has resumed like in full. What's your analysis of the situation?
Well, sometime over the weekend, the United States made the decision to reactivate the CATs, the crisis action teams. I had made a point previously that as long as those CATs were not up and operating, the prospect of the U.S. expanding combat operations was low. Well, that's now, at least at CENTCOM, the CATs are up and operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Puts a strain on the folks that have to turn 12-hour shifts, 12 on, 12 off. So the United States has decided to restart the war, and I think it's an incredibly stupid decision because the United States does not have the combat power to sustain this operation. They're proceeding, I think, on the assumption that they can put enough military pressure on Iran that Iran will back down, back away, and that the United States can degrade Iran's ability to launch coastal defense cruise missiles, drones, and short-range ballistic missiles at ships that are trying to avoid Iran's protocols under the Strait of Hormuz, or the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, as they've named it, the PGSA. And under that authority, the protocols are simple. If you want to transit the strait, no problems. Submit an application. In that application, identify the name of the ship's captain, owner of the vessel, name of the ship, the destination of the ship, the quantity, what's contained, what's the cargo, and the nationalities of the crews. If you do that, you get to go through. And it's you can either transit, if you provide that information, you can transit to the Iranian Strait, or I think equally through the Omani Strait. But the United States has been playing a game where they keep trying to infiltrate ships, have them turn off their AIS so that they can't be identified by any kind of global positioning system, and try to run the strait. And Iran made it clear, any ship that tries to avoid compliance, we're going to use force. And they have used force, which then the United States uses as a pretext to start attacking Iran. Now the problem the United States faces is they reportedly were using HIMARS launchers in the early days of this. Well, HIMARS launches 3 types of missiles. One of the missiles is not, it's a guided missile, a multiple launch, a rocket launch system. It has a range of about 24 miles. So they're not using that. All that would do is drop missiles and rockets into the sea. They have some ATACMS, but actually from Bandar Abbas, or from Bahrain to Bandar Abbas, that is the maximum range, probably exceeds the range of the ATACMS. So they really can't use ATACMS, which leaves them with this precision strike munition, a missile. Except in 2026, fiscal year 2026 that's ended, the Lockheed Martin produced a grand total of 56. So, if they fire 8 of those a day, they're out in out in 7 days. So they don't have that, and that leaves them having to use missiles fired, cruise missiles fired from ships, from aircraft, and they have limited number of Tomahawks and limited number of JASSMs. Now, it's now say around 2,000 for Tomahawks, Well, the point is, every day that passes, if they fire 1, 10, 20, that's 20 fewer than they had the day before. And if they keep that up every day, they are depleting their supply, and they do not have the ability to reproduce and replace those on an as used basis. Just the opposite. They might be able to produce 2 tomahawks a month. Well, if you use 60 tomahawks in a month, you're running a deficit. So the United States is trying to fight a war that it materially cannot sustain. That's number one. Number two, Iran is firing ballistic missiles back. Let me specify that the targets the U.S. is trying to hit is probably in excess of 1,200 to 1,500 different targets. That's over a 200-mile length of territory. Well, you're not going to degrade Iran's ability to attack ships. They said, again, the United States doesn't have enough missiles to take all those out. For Iran's part, though, it only has to worry about attacking 10 targets, 2 air bases in Jordan, Muwafaq al-Salti, and the Prince Hassan Air Base. They have 1 air base in UAE, Al Dhafra. They have Al Udeid in Qatar. They have Al Isa in Bahrain, Al Isa Salman in Kuwait. And then they can hit the port, Duqm in the Oman. And now they've hit Faraja in UAE, the oil facility. That's it. So Iran can keep pounding those sites day after day after day until they're going to reach a point where those sites will be so degraded, so beat up, that the U.S. will have to abandon them.
Hey, just a very quick note. The best way to support this channel is by signing up for my free Substack. You can also help with a paid subscription there, or you can get some of our new merch on neutralitystudies.com. Links below. See you there.
It seems so self-defeating, and again, like, what's the kind of strategy in order to get to some form of victory? We now have Donald Trump even, inspiring the Iranians. For the first time, I think I've read a tweet by Mr. Abbas, the foreign minister of Iran, saying that he agrees with Donald Trump. He agrees that whoever provides security in the strait should be able to charge a toll, but that they, the Iranians, would never, ever charge 20% of the value of cargo, as Mr. Trump just put out there, obviously inspiring Iran, but it would be more like 1 or 2%, which is still an absolutely huge amount if you think about the value that these ships carry around, right? Much more than what the Iranians were thinking of charging, probably. How does Trump come up with this idea of a 20%? First, that they will succeed in controlling the strait, and secondly, that they then will just levy 20% of value of cargo. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, no, it is. And he reversed himself on the 20% yesterday. Said, "Oh, okay, never mind. We'll worry about getting investments from these countries." But the problem, as it boils down, is the United States needs the crude oil that comes out of the Persian Gulf because it's sour crude. I know some people are getting sick and tired of hearing me talk about this, but the sour crude is what U.S. refineries are set up to process to produce diesel and aviation fuel. And since the cutoff of the Strait of Hormuz, now going on 5 months, you've created a diesel civil aviation fuel shortage worldwide. So the price of diesel now is going up. It's increasing here now in the United States. The gasoline prices aren't going up as dramatically because the United States produces plenty of sweet oil. That means it's low in sulfur, and they've got a few refineries that can handle that. So people look at oil futures and think, oh, it's gone up, but ignore the oil futures. Focus on the supply of diesel and aviation fuel.
Right.
Those shortages on that kill economies.
Yeah, because that's the real economy. That's not the speculative kind of gambling part of the economy. That's what's going
Correct.
to make things more expensive, that are not only your pump, but actually the potato chips that you want to buy in the convenience store. So all of that stuff needs to be transported. But
Yeah.
On top of that, what surprised me is that Saudi Arabia restarted its war with Yemen. Because if there's something that could make this crisis even worse, it would be another strait blocked, right?
Right.
What's the rationale there, and what's the current situation actually?
It's an example of lack of strategic thinking. So picture yourself, you're Saudi Arabia. You're not able to export the volume of oil you were when the Persian Gulf was open. So now you're putting it through a pipeline that runs to Yanbu on the West Coast.
Hmm.
And so you get now maybe 5 million barrels, 6 million. So here's your strategy. We're going to attack Yemen, attack the Houthis, so that they will be inspired to attack us and possibly launch ballistic missiles at Yanbu to shut down our oil production and shut down Bab el-Mandab. What a plan. Great plan. You're going, that's an insane strategy. Of course it is. And so what's important to note is after that initial attack, and then the Houthis didn't waste any time. They hit 2 airfields in Saudi Arabia and said, next one's Yanbu. What did Saudi Arabia do? They said, never mind. We didn't mean it.
So, I mean, they attacked the airport in Sana'a basically just in order to inconvenience the delegation that went to the funeral of Al Khamenei in Iran. I mean, what was that about? It's such a stupid thing to do.
I have no insight into their thinking. I'd call it lack of thinking. I think it was more emotional. I think that.
But you don't think it was U.S. inspired?
It might have been. And they were dumb enough to, if that was U.S. inspired, the Saudis, shame on them for listening to the U.S. because U.S. just created bigger problems for them. Because, my understanding is the Pakistanis, Asa Munir, got a hold of MBS and said, basically, what the hell are you thinking? What are you doing? You're going to cripple yourselves. Stop it. Saudis have stopped it. They have not renewed the attacks. The Houthis are holding off and shutting down Bab el-Mandab. Russia is keeping that. Iran is keeping that in its back pocket to clamp down on that as these attacks now continue. So yesterday, Iran announced, okay, we are now no longer bound by the MOU. U.S. has rejected it. They've broken it. They've broken the ceasefire. They're reinstituting the blockade. They're reimposing sanctions. They violated every tenet of the MOU. So we're no longer bound by it. And as a result of that, I think Iran will then start charging tolls to go through the Strait of Hormuz. And it's going to free up Hezbollah to start attacking Israeli soldiers.
We now also had an announcement by Oman, which has been very careful in the past to not lean far out of the window. And it said that the biggest threat in the Gulf or to the Gulf states is actually not Iran, but Israel. That surprised me a lot. The Omanis are very, very cautious. Are we witnessing kind of a reappreciation for the balance of forces on in the Gulf? Because I mean, Oman has always been the neutral Gulf state, very clearly.
Right.
And it said so even on its foreign policy page. I did a video about that just earlier. I mean, it says very clearly we want to be friends to all. That includes Iran, that includes the Gulf Cooperation Organization, and so on. So they've always played a neutral card. But do you think that the Gulf states themselves are now like the wider group is looking again at the situation and reassessing?
Well, if they made the bet, okay, we're going to trust the United States to protect us. We think the United States is bigger, more powerful militarily than Iran, but now they're discovering that that's not true. That no matter how many bombing runs the United States tries to make along the shores, the western shores of Iran that border the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf. Iran has ample supplies and munitions to fight back decisively, and really inflict damage on any Gulf country that is going to side with the United States. Bahrain and Kuwait in particular are paying a very heavy price. It's noteworthy that despite the Saudis' stupid decision with the Houthis, Saudis are staying out of this, sort of keeping a low profile. They understand that Iran now can really, if they don't side with Iran can hurt them. That they won't, because Iran can also take out that pipeline that runs east to west. And so I think Saudis are being extremely cautious. Hell, it's bad when Israel itself tells the United States, "Hey, stop flying your KC-135s in here." Now,
Did they do that? Did that happen?
Oh yeah, yesterday. The Ministry of Transport. Now, supposedly today, the Netanyahu overrode it, rescinded it. But it's a further sign. Israel recognizes, or let me paint the scenario. Most of the U.S. air operations with fixed-wing aircraft are coming out of Jordan. Once those bases are decimated, which I think they're in the process of being decimated, the U.S. is going to have to relocate. Well, where do they relocate? Syria? Lebanon? No. They have no other place to go but Israel. And so this is what's really happened now over the last week is Iran is making the final push to force the United States militarily out of the Persian Gulf. The U.S. won't be able to come in and establish a meaningful presence. They're too exposed, and their air defense systems do not work against the ballistic missiles of Iran. Hell, they don't even work against some of the drones. We watched yesterday in Kuwait where a warehouse got hammered twice with drones. In theory, the Patriots are supposed to be able to shoot down the drones. Well, they failed on that.
No, I mean, it's quite amazing. I mean, the on the one hand, how much we underestimated the military capacity of Iran. On the other hand, how much the military capacity of the US was overestimated by basically everybody under the sun, including, I think, the Chinese. But the Iranians also made it very clear from a long time ago. They said the goal now of the war that the United States started on their end is to make sure the US can never, ever do this again, which means exactly what you're saying, push them out of the Gulf region and probably out of the entire region as far away as possible. And if they can achieve this through negotiations, through the MOU and whatnot, then they will do that. And if the United States doesn't live up to its promises there, then they will do it they will implement it militarily. And now the United States chose that it wants this Iranian policy be implemented militarily. I mean, again, it seems so self-defeating, especially since you pointed out the United States doesn't have the toys it needs in order to prevent that from happening. So do you see any kind of other military rationale that the US might have right now, that the White House might have in order to somehow use this bombing campaign as a bargaining chip in order to get a better MOU out of it or something that we are not seeing?
Well, if that's their intent, it's having the exact opposite effect. And anybody out there who's wanted to argue that, well, China is going to put pressure on Iran because of the disruption of the Persian Gulf, let me suggest an alternative. China's quite happy with this. Why? Because every Tomahawk missile, every JASSM missile that the United States fires at Iran is one less Tomahawk missile and JASSM missile that could be fired at China. China is using Iran as a proxy to attrit the U.S. combat capability. I think that's what's going on right now.
I mean, use as a proxy is a big word. I mean, all you need to do is to sit back and do nothing, right? You don't even need to invest anything. You don't need to tell anything. The United States is doing everything for China in order for Iran to then serve as a proxy, right? In order to take away these missiles and military capabilities that could be used against China, which actually a lot of Washington has said they want to do. And the anti-China neocons are very mad now that the anti-Iran neocons won over and get the arsenal used on Tehran instead of Beijing.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird situation.
Except on top of it, China's providing Iran some missiles, and it's providing it with intelligence. It's taken. I guess Iran used to use GPS. They've gotten rid of GPS. They're using Baidu now. So all of a sudden, some of the advantages the United States had by being able to identify locations of people, they no longer have. So China's, and remember, China and Russia signed a defense pact back on January 28th, I believe, with Iran, and I think both China and Russia are living up to that. So they see this as they see this correctly as a way to further weaken the United States militarily. I think both were probably surprised last year when the United States failed to shut down the Houthis. They tried, and then Trump went in with heavier force, and he suffered heavier losses. And basically, the Houthis drove 2 aircraft carriers out of the Red Sea.
Yeah, it's quite surprising that now the 2020s are proving that the time of the big navy is over, right? The navy can go in and win a war, and you just go and then occupy Iraq and whatnot after you fire at it from all sides. It doesn't work like that anymore. What surprises me though is that the United States seems not to have the same drone capabilities as Iran. That we haven't seen a switch from these missiles, which we now know are way too expensive for the boom that they give, and that we have not seen the US switching to kind of cheaper drone-based strategy and mass production, because that's what happened in Ukraine, right? Ukraine is now pounding Russia with drones. Why is it that the United States is not doing the same?
Well, they may be trying to. The problem is the United States institutionally has been biased towards producing these very expensive drones. For example, the MQ-9 Reaper. Just the body of that alone is like $35 million. And then when you attach optics pods and weapons pods to it, the price goes up another 35 million. So you wind up with a $70 million drone that the United States is shooting down. The biggest, I was shocked when I learned about the Triton. The Triton is this big drone, $250 million for one drone. And Iran shot one of those down.
But this kind of gives a new meaning to the MIC, right? That's the military industrial capture. You cannot escape the kind of defense contractors you already have, and they produce what they have, and therefore they will spend money on Capitol Hill for you to buy what they've got in their inventory, so you don't get to innovate as much as somebody else, as the little guy who has to be agile.
Yeah. So it's it is a combination of a strategic and tactical mess for the United States, because now there's talk that it's going to try to do some sort of ground operation. Boy, I hope that's wrong, because all it is, it's going to end up getting a bunch of U.S. kids killed.
Do you think they're serious about this? I mean, it seems a lunatic, but are the people who do this, they are lunatics. But sending in troops wherever it is, even on one of these islands, that seems like a death sentence.
Well, yeah, but the real question is, how do you get them there? So the only place where the United States could conceivably conduct like an amphibious operation is in Chabahar. Well, it's not being able to land some Marines on shore. How do you sustain them? How do you resupply this? Because once you bring your ships in close enough, they're going to be Iran's got a whole bevy of anti-ship missiles that'll be going after those ships if they come in that close. And to conduct a amphibious operation, they're going to have to come in close. So I don't see any way to do that to minimize risk to the Marines. So that leaves, if they're going to do an air assault on Kamsh Island or Kish or Karg, again, you drop the soldiers in there. You can only carry so much water. I guarantee you, they'll carry enough water that could sustain them maybe half a day tops. So then how do you get the resupply of water? You got to bring in pallets of water. That's heavy. Anybody that's gone to like a store to buy a case of bottled water, that's a 45-pound load right there. Well, multiply that times 100 cases. All of a sudden, you're carrying close to a ton of water. And then where do you store it? It's going to sit out in the hot sun, and you're going to have hot bottled water. Maybe, drop some tea bags in it, make some tea maybe. So it's just the logistics of it are just insane.
Yeah, the logistics is and without logistics you can't do it. I mean, it's utterly impossible to sustain. So
Right.
and let's not forget, it is second half of July. We're going toward August. It's like it's sweltering. It's like 40 degrees Celsius plus. It's
50
degrees Celsius plus. It's
in excess. Yeah.
So all of this seems to just indicate that whatever this current bombing campaign is, it cannot be more than trying to get a better seat at the negotiating table. To me, I mean, there's no realistic way of doing anything unless somebody is again thinking about nuking Iran. But even that, Iran made it clear that they will survive a nuke and then they will actually end Israel. They made that very clear. And there is ways to end Israel by bombing the desalination plant, by bombing the nuclear facility that they have in the Negev desert. There's ways to do that.
Yes.
So do you think how crazy do you think are the current discussions in the Situation Room of the people who make the decisions?
I think the delusion. They believe their own nonsense about we're so powerful, Iran's so weak. We've destroyed the Iranian army, we've destroyed the Air Force, destroyed the Navy, so they really don't have anything to fight back with, and it's absolutely not true. So, and this, these won't be the first leaders to make some gross miscalculation about the capabilities of the other side. I mean, look at Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union back in 1941. Yeah, that turned out well. That was a good choice. So I think the United States is banking on that they can destroy enough Iranian missiles and drones that it will weaken Iran so that Iran will say, "Oh, we give up." But that's not going to happen. The United States does not have the combat power to do that, and Iran's production capabilities to replace what's destroyed is still intact because it's all underground.
Okay, so that at least seems like something that rational people could come up with. That the idea is not we will win and have regime change and whatnot, but we will get to the point where we degrade the Iranians' ability to shoot at ships, and hence then, since we have our people in the region, we then control the Strait of Hormuz and we keep degrading their capacity. But that's banking on the idea that the US can outproduce Iran.
Which it can't. Yeah, which it can't, simply because these precision missiles and drones, they require rare earth minerals. China has stopped shipping those rare earth minerals, so there's a supply shortage. And the United States, we have the actual raw minerals in this country. What we don't have is the processing. The processing is expensive to do. It causes some environmental harm, and it'll take a year or two to actually get a processing plant up and running. Now, it's not to say the United States can't come up with an alternative to the Chinese supply, but right now, like the Chinese control tungsten, they control gallium, which are two critical elements, and the magnets that go into these precision guidance systems. China's got the monopoly on those. So you just, as you pointed out, it's all about logistics. The logistics, if you don't have the logistics, you don't survive.
No, you can't keep the chain up, right? You can't you need a way to actually bring things to the people who are then supposed to implement this. What do you think is the timeline here until the US, runs so low on even the lower end weapons that they just can't fire anymore? Because what I believe to have understood now is that the idea of the MOU was to get to a pause in the kinetic phase of the war and then try to sneak in a second transport route through the Strait of Hormuz, right? To step by step salami slice yourself into providing the southern route is the US route, and the northern route that Iran controls it then doesn't matter very much anymore, and you establish kind of de facto that you have control of half of the strait. And Iran shut that down, right? Iran said no, and the US is now mad that Iran said you can't do that, and is kind of lashing out. But what's the timeline that you can see going forward?
I'd say another 2 weeks, tops. So remember, it was, the first war, the war that started on the 28th lasted 5 weeks, roughly 40 days, 45 days.
Right.
So why did it end on day 45? What was going on behind the scenes that incentivized the United States to seek a ceasefire? It's oil. So when the war started on the 28th and they closed the Strait of Hormuz, that stopped ships full of oil from coming out. But there were already ships on the high seas making their final voyages to offload their cargo. So there wasn't an actual real shortage for about another 40 days. I mean, the last ship, I think it took about 44 days to reach its final port. It was then that the US is recognizing we've got a shortage of this sour crude. The sour crude is essential to make diesel and aviation fuel. That's why Trump sought the ceasefire, and why he signed the MOU, because remember, he said at the G7, we're going to run out of oil in 4 weeks. Well, that calculation hasn't changed.
It kind of explains now why Trump had no problem and wanted to sign it so quickly, because, at the time we all said this is a surrender document and you even sign it in Versailles. I mean, obviously he doesn't care about all of that or know about the irony of it, but basically he signed that thing because it was very clear it doesn't mean anything anyhow. This is just a pause button that then gives us another 1 or 2 months during which we bring again more crude through the strait. That gives us time to recharge, and then we just go for the second blow, right? So it doesn't really matter what's on that piece of paper, right? It could be anything, because I mean, all it is a pause, and pause is over in that sense, right?
Yeah, and I think that right now the Trump's responding more to pressure from Israel, from the pro-Zionist elements in the U.S. government, and the pro-Zionists that are contributors to his fortune, let's call it that. But nobody's really sat down and explained to him what the logistical shortages are. Now, I don't know what the stockpile of HARM missiles is. That's another one. HARM can be attached to drones and to planes and can fire. So it's not like the United States is completely out. But the point is, you are draining these inventories, and the supply chain is not in place to replace them as used. It's one thing if you say you fire 10 of these missiles, but you're producing 20 per day, so no big deal. You fire 10 in one day, but you produce 20. What's happening is they're firing 8 or 10 per day, and they can only produce maybe 8 per month. So if you do the math, over 30 days, all of a sudden let's say you fire 10 per day, that's 300, and you've only replaced 8. So you're going into deficit spending.
Yeah, it's quite fantastic. And deficit spending here is not something like with a Fed, right? That you can just make up out of thin air. You cannot make missiles up just with a push of a button. This is a different game. It's the real economy, just like the oil is the real economy. But okay, in that case, all Iran needs to do is to keep standing and keep firing longer than the US can. So you put yourself at a structural disadvantage that is quite amazing for a state with a military as experienced as the United States.
Right, and listen, we're fixated on oil, or at least the sour crude, the high sulfur oil that is used primarily. It's the primary source for diesel and aviation fuel. But we've already got a global shortage. Now, this furtherance of the blockade and the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz now exacerbates that. It now makes it worse, not better.
Do we have any indications about, pressure coming or starting to come from the allies, from Europe and Japan? I mean, Japan is very unhappy about this. Again, they're now also again going to suffer shortages for something that has nothing to do with them at all. Quite on the contrary, they've tried for the longest time to have a more or less decent relationship with Iran. The Europeans too. I mean, they're in such a pickle. Do we hear any? Is there any signs that there's a palace revolt going on in the satellites?
Not yet. Now, Japan, like South Korea, I know there are at least 3 or 4 tankers that have come out of Iran since June 17th that are headed to Japan. So, Japan's got they'll have a 3 or 4 week cushion now, because at least they got some oil coming in. But that comes in now. There's no more en route, so they're going to be back to the same situation they were, 40 days into the first phase of this war. And this is the thing that people don't understand. They think of oil as oil, and you've got to differentiate between the sweet crude and the sour crude. The United States produces a surplus of the sweet, but in the United States, 70% of our refineries are built specifically to handle the sour crude, not the sweet crude. And so, and it's not just a matter of going in and throwing a couple of switches or putting on a new computer screen. No, it's much more complicated and costly.
Yeah. No, it is. And those are real constraints, not something that you can just flip a switch and then change.
Right.
Maybe just a last topic to end on. Any thoughts about the United States declaring war on international law by putting out that statement that they're going to use an all of government approach against the International Criminal Court? That I mean, it's on script with what they've been doing already, but that Rubio would announce that in this bigger fashion, that they're trying to destroy the court. That's kind of a big one.
Well, Sergei Lavrov said that the United States is agreement incapable, and he's right. In fact, we've got case after case of the United States walking away from international treaties, international agreements. The anti-ballistic missile treaty is one example. The Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement, another example. The whatever agreement was reached between Putin and Trump, that's an example. The United States walked away from that. Russia's been quite clear on that. The MOU that was just signed, the United States violated every paragraph of that MOU. So, if you're another country saying we can negotiate with the United States based on, what's the evidence for that? The evidence shows the exact opposite. The United States flouts international law. It ignores international law. Listen, assassinating a foreign leader. They're all upset about, Iran may assassinate Donald Trump. Well, hello, guys. You've already carried out multiple assassinations of nuclear scientists, General Soleimani, and now the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The U.S. has no room to talk or complain about this.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, isn't it? Like saying, we must now do a counterattack because somebody said that they might They might assassinate us, coming from the guy who assassinated the other guy, who kidnapped the guy in Venezuela, who's threatening every single dignitary who's not online, right? Who outright says we might just kill their diplomats on the way back home. It's quite something, but it shows this kind of idea of impunity, right? We can do whatever it is because it's U.S. sovereignty, and if any one of them even so much as thinks about doing something similar, well, walk on nukes. I mean, that's the mindset, isn't it?
Well, there's a Yiddish word that's appropriate here, chutzpah. Here's the United States that declares in 2003, by God, we gotta attack Iran because they got weapons of mass destruction.
Iraq,
What particularly? Oh, they've got chemical and biological weapons. Huh? Where did Iraq get those chemical and biological weapons? Oh, that was from the United States. The United States provided the precursors and they provided the biological agents. So it's like we're like the arsonist sets fire to the house and then declares that we need to sue the homeowner because their house is on fire, when we're the ones that set the damn thing on fire. Okay? That is classic definition of chutzpah.
Well, the chutzpah is quite amazing. But Larry, thank you so much for your insights here. I don't want to keep you longer. It's getting late at your end. I want to show everybody again that they can find you on Transition Protocol. They can find it in Spanish, in French, in German, in other languages, in Russian as well. They can find your English language channel on just Transition Protocol.
And also sonar21.com.
Sonar21.com for everybody who wants to read what Larry, the analysis he puts out. I mean, you write wonderful long pieces with a lot of data inside it. Anything to add at this point?
No, it's just, there was a famous baseball player from the 60s, Yogi Berra, who was always known for having sort of malapropisms, and one of his famous sayings was, "This is deja vu all over again." So,
oh, the U.S. deja vu all over again. Larry Johnson, thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, Pascal, thank you.